Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest issue of Comic Book Gentleman. I am your host, Greg, and I'm joined by my co host, Dave.
Hey, everybody.
This is the comic book podcast where we use our decades of experience in the industry to discuss some of the most divisive issues, that type of stuff and all that good jazz. So yeah, this latest issue, one of the biggest events in comic books happened this year. I mean, it's not as big as it normally is, but it's essentially the Christmas slash Woodstock slash Coachella of comic book the industry is San Diego Comic-Con. Obviously, with the whole global situation, we kind of had they obviously did it a lot differently, which had some good points, it had some bad points. It's definitely something we're going to discuss going forward. But yeah, I figured we could, this is a great opportunity to talk about fan expos and Comic Cons in general. So, Dave, what is your experience with this type of event?
I think the first one I'd ever been to a quote unquote Comic Con was actually the what is now the Calgary Entertainment Expo. The first one that myself and a good buddy of mine, Rod, attended was in a YMCA gymnasium, and it was just a bunch of tables set up around the gymnasium and then some in the middle. And it was literally just people hawking comics. There was like very, very little like action figures or statues or clothing. It was just comic books, and that was the first experience I had, which was like, of course, mind blowing coming from somewhere like Fort St. John, where you just don't have that kind of thing. Just to see so many people in one location, nowhere near what it is now today.
Yep.
But just talking comic books, selling comic books, trading comic books. That was my first interaction with a comic event. Call it that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about yourself?
Yeah, similar to you. I didn't do Calgary. I actually did the Edmonton Fan Expo. I think the first one I went to was 2013, because it's when my wife and I still lived in Edmonton, so we went to there, and then we went every other year for a little bit. I mean, I did dabble a little bit before that. I went to a random anime con that was hosted at my high school for some reason. This was before I went to the Edmonton one. It was in Edmonton still, but it was just at my high school. It was just even smaller than that. It was like, a couple classrooms, just, people talking about anime and manga and video games and whatnot. So like, yeah, I've been to the Edmonton Fan Expo a couple times, went to that random anime one, and then, sort of a similar thread, I've been to a couple like video game tournaments. And the reason I say it's kind of a certain thread, because I definitely agree with you. Like, the craziest thing is coming from like, smaller areas and whatnot, is just having that actual group of people who like the same thing you do, want to talk about it. They go in depth about it. Like, having all that group of people in the same room together is just like, that's what I consider like a fan expo and whatnot. Like, even if it's like 20 people, or if it's like 500, that's what I picture when I picture fan expo is like. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think growing from there, I mean, we went to the Calgary one, for probably about, I want to say close to 10 years straight.
Wow.
And it just got like bigger and
Yeah.
bigger, and then all of a sudden it's at the Stampede grounds, and it's just growing and growing and growing, and more stuff's kind of filtering in, and it just became pretty much for myself, certainly for Rod, it was the highlight. Gave me a good reason to come down to Calgary, visit friends, family, and whatnot, but also to attend this giant event. Like you said, big place full of people that are just ready to talk about comic books. And as it started to grow, and you actually started getting artists and writers in, like I still remember going around at one of the events and stopping and talking to Mark Waid.
Yeah.
For probably close to an hour and 45 minutes.
Wow, that's crazy.
Just shooting the shit about storylines and things that he'd been working on that didn't end up panning out, and it was fascinating. Same thing with the artists. getting to know some of your favorite artists through the years, and getting to talk to them and see how much they had as far as input and how that's changed in the creative process of putting some of these comic books together. It was it really built up into what it is now, but just a little less. It was a little more comic focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I mean, definitely there's a difference between Comic-Con, like San Diego Comic-Con, even like the bigger ones in the States, like in New York and whatnot, and then there's the fan expos, which is what you have in like Edmonton and Calgary and whatnot. Like, you don't have the level of headlines that you normally get, but you still have that core experience of, like, you can see a famous person that you've been reading for how many years. You can go to a panel where they tell you about like all their crazy stories in the industry and whatnot. Like, it's amazing. Like, I can't, like, my favorite part was we were at the Edmonton one. I think it was the second time we went, and Kevin Eastman was there, the guy who made TMNT.
Oh, yeah.
And I just stood like 5 feet away from him and just stared at him. And my wife was just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "That's him. It's him." And she's like, "Well, you want to go talk to him?" But it was like a really long line. I was like, I just want to breathe his air,
Yeah.
Like, just like, give me his air,
The level of interaction. Like, I remember when we started going to the little bit bigger ones, and one of the first ones that really sticks out to my mind as far as like big names. Obviously Mark Waid was there, but they also had Lou Ferrigno was there. So we got to go up and meet like the original Hulk. The guy that they didn't do like animation. No, they just painted him green and threw him out there. I'm not even sure how old he is at this point, but he's huge.
Yep.
Absolutely huge. Super nice guy, right? We ended up bumping into Ray Park, who played Darth Maul, and Toad in the X-Men films, and Rod, who's a huge Star Wars fan, was so excited and we got up there, we got our pictures signed up and got to talking for a couple of minutes. And Rod's, big, fantasy was like, I want to, have a spar with this guy. And Rod didn't end up getting a chance to spar with him, but he did come out and spar against some of the fans that were there. And we got to stand there and kind of watch him take on some fans. And those kinds of interactions, I think are they're still there at the expos, but I don't see it at the same level with some of the people that you see in the Marvel or the DC movies. It's more at that kind of that level below. Yeah. But the experience is just mind blowing. My wife got to meet one of her favorite characters from Doctor Who, and she was just Captain Jack. She was just like, you just blew her mind.
Yeah.
Right. We walk away and she's just like, oh my god, thank you for forcing me to experience this. And it was just something else. And it's just, there's nothing like a Comic-Con. Even taking my niece and my nephew to it, with my brother, who's like the least comic book fan ever, just walking around and seeing people in cosplay and being involved in stuff and being able to get your face painted up by professional makeup artists or, whatever it is. It's an experience that even people that have no clue what they're looking at as far as comic books are concerned, or any kind of geek, industry, they just still have a blast.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I like to do, I don't know like what Calgary is like, but they had a entire hall that was just like local artists or like people who came to the event and whatnot, and just selling prints and whatnot. I'm assuming most expos have this. My favorite thing was when you're wandering that hall and then you see the most obscure thing that you didn't think anybody else in the world actually enjoyed, and then you see like the entire booth dedicated to it, and you're like, my people. I found you. And then you like talk to the artist for like a solid hour, just like, you watch the show too? It's like, yeah, of course, the show's amazing. And then you just that's the type of connections you get and all that stuff. I love that type of stuff. It's been a while since I've been to one, so I'm definitely jonesing for one. But yeah, like even like you were saying, like the differences between big ones and small ones. Like my wife, I was in the washroom or something, and she saw the guy who played Pippin literally was an inch away from her, just casually walking by. And it's like that's something you wouldn't get at a big one, because at the big one he'd be swarmed, like he'd have probably bodyguards around him and whatnot, and like no, you could literally just like reach out and touch him, type of thing. So Pippin from Lord of the Rings, yeah.
It's like some of the people that we've had an opportunity to interact with, and just like not okay, I'm standing in line, I get up, I take my picture, say a few words, I say a few words back, and then I leave. Like, I mean, there have been times where I'm looking at something, and then I'll look over the side, I'm looking at figures or something, and I'm checking out all these action figures, and then I go to reach for one, and I realize somebody else is reaching for it, and I turn and I stop, and it's Michael Rosenbaum. Who played Lex Luthor. Yeah. And you're like, and he's like, oh, you like these? Yeah. And then you start talking to this, TV star, like he's just a regular fan.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing. I've met Dakota Fanning, the same thing. I was looking at T-shirts. This guy did this really cool thing with retro T-shirts where he took these old retro comic book covers or album covers or various different things, and then he put them on T-shirts, and it's just really cool design. And I'm flipping these shirts over, and this person standing next to me, and I just happened to glance over, and I kind of took a step back, and she's like, "Yeah, these are pretty cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, Are you Dakota Fanning?"
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I'm here for the expo. And I'm like, holy shit. So, you end up talking to that person for 15 minutes. And it's amazing, like, going to these things, the opportunities to get to meet some of these people that are involved in these things that you love so much, and how, like, down to earth they are.
Yeah.
And being able to talk to them about that fandom thing at a level that they understand. They're not just going, hey man, I just play a part. I really don't know what you're talking about. Like, they know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually care, and they're actually like fans of things too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just there for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice. Like, it's nice to reaffirm that, like, hey, not everybody in Hollywood is a weirdo. So yeah. Did you ever go?
Everybody in the comic book industry is, like, I always thought meeting someone like Mark Waid or Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane, that I would be like, they'd just be like, give me your shit, I'll sign it, take a picture and get out of here, kind of thing. Like, I got, I'm too big.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're just really down to earth guys.
Yeah.
And women. It just run of the mill. Don't, for the most part, in my experience, I haven't met a lot of them that have, it felt like they were above you as a, I'm a creator, you're just a fan. Mm-hmm. They're always more than accommodating, time willing to have a good conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're actual nice, real people. Yeah, it's good to hear. So did you ever go to any of the panels, or were you mainly like, I'm just looking at the comics and the famous people, or did you actually go to the panels?
I went to 2 panels. One was a panel on, it was geared towards people that were interested, obviously primarily writing comics, but it was kind of like a creative writing. And they had a panel of 2 or 3 various, pretty well-known writers within the comic book industry, and they just talked about, how they broke in, things you can do to kind of move in that direction. And then they went through just a lot of process stuff, like, this is how, I do my writing process. Oh, this is how I do my writing process. And it was fascinating because I myself, I like to do a little bit of creative writing on the side. And it was just interesting to see, oh, okay, your process isn't too far off from my process. I mean, you're a much better writer than I am. But, but it's nice to know, like, I'm on the right page. Mm-hmm. But it was very informative. And the ability to ask questions and hear other people ask questions of these people that you kind of put up on that pedestal is great.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I remember we went and I actually went to a panel that had Chris Claremont in it.
Oh.
And it was just interesting to hear, like, I mean, obviously it was a lot different. I mean, probably not a lot different, but it's just interesting to hear like what it was like back in the '80s and that time period, especially when he was like the number one X-Men guy for so
Yeah.
long. Like just to hear his thought process and like, yeah, this is just how I would write a character and whatnot. And then yeah, you'd have all the guys in the crowd that are like, how do I become you? And it's like, I don't know, you just write, man. Like,
Yeah. You
yeah,
just get in there.
it's crazy. Like, I didn't go to. I went to a few panels. I found the panels very interesting because it's just like you just get so in depth to such specific topics that you normally would never hear about.
Yeah.
Like I went to one that had Charisma Carpenter and Jewel State, so Cordelia from Buffy, and then I can't remember her name in Firefly now. Kaylee from Firefly.
Okay.
And it was just them talking about like what it was like working, in that industry, and like when their shows got canceled, or like you could ask them really random. I actually asked them a question. Like I got up and asked them a question, like
Yeah.
ask them a super obscure question and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And they're just like, "Yeah, I don't know, sure, why not?" And it's like, oh, cool. Like it's just yeah, just I think the interaction like with the famous people and then the interactions with the other fans are just really what make expos and Comic-Con so like that's why everybody wants to go. That's why I highly encourage, if you can go. Like I don't think everybody needs to go to San Diego Comic-Con. Like I feel like hey, just go to the Edmonton one, just go to the Calgary one. Like it's still such a good time, even if it's a local thing. Like I said, like if you had a small anime thing in a high school, or if you have like a weekly video game tournament, like just being around other nerds is so fulfilling and so like
Yeah.
reassuring and whatnot. Because especially when you like you said, we live in Fort St. John, which isn't exactly the nerd capital of the world or anything like that.
No.
So when you actually like go to your people and be like, hey, brothers and sisters in arms, let's talk about D&D. It's just so refreshing.
It's funny. Like my comic expo experience is kind of evolved because, like I said, like when it first started for me, it was very predominantly about comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to the first couple where all of a sudden it was like, okay, you've got some anime, some manga. Okay, I can see the relation.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, I'm good with that. And then you'd start to see, the action figure guys starting to show up, and then all of a sudden, okay, it's all still related. But then at some point, it just kind of did a big shift, and it was more about just anything kind of geekdom. And I think that's where you saw the name of it actually change from the Calgary like Comic-Con to the Entertainment Expo. And at first I was kind of taken back at first because I was kind of like, oh, these other groups are starting to invade my 1 year geekdom tour over the weekend with all the stuff that I'm not that I didn't play video games, but I wasn't a hardcore video gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly had some experience with anime or manga, but I don't collect it. I don't focus on that.
Yeah.
But then when it really started getting into like sci-fi and fantasy, and some of the people that they would have at the Comic-Con, like I one of the more recent ones that I went to, I met Cactus Jack from WWE.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell has that got to do with
Comics.
like comic books? But like you said, it's even though there's like I'm not a hardcore gamer, and I could still hold down and have a great conversation with somebody that was.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody that does cosplay might not even know who they're dressed up as. Right. They're just into cosplay. But you can have a great conversation, and it was just, even though you didn't share the same niche within the nerddom, you could still, have a great experience talking and interacting with those people. And after I got over my, old man curmudgeon, you're on my lawn, get off it.
Mm-hmm.
I really started to enjoy whether it was cosplay or the various panels and actors and whatnot that they were bringing in, or special guests as they called them, or the various other nerddom stuff that would kind of had started to kind of creep into the expo. And it just made it that much broader of an experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it's very interesting now because I feel like back in the day there used to be a division like, oh, he's the video game guy, I'm the comic book guy, and then he's like the, D&D guy. But now it feels like so most people are so diverse now in their nerddom. Like
Yeah,
you rarely like it's so much easier to get into more stuff. It's so much easier to yeah, just be exposed to that type of stuff. Is so much, yeah, that's why you need like the more. And then hey, even maybe you'll find stuff at expo or comic cons that you've never heard of and like, oh man, I'm gonna check that out. Like
yeah,
I remember and it was funny because you could always tell when something was popular because like there'd be a million cosplays of one thing you didn't like, you'd never seen it before, it wasn't there last year, but then the next year every other person is in that cosplay. I remember the like third year we went, almost everybody was in Mad Max cosplay
yeah,
because Fury Road had just come out, and I was like, man, like what is happening? Like, is this movie that good? And it got
yeah,
me to go watch Mad Max Fury Road, and it's such a good movie, and I'm so glad I did. But I don't. The main reason I did is because I saw like every other person cosplaying as a
yeah,
character from there. Like it was cool.
yeah. And I mean, guaranteed you'd be walking around whether it's a comic book or somebody selling posters or T-shirts or something, you'll come across and you'll be like, man, that's pretty cool. I kind of like that. And then you're all of a sudden now you're down the rabbit hole, and it's like, I went to the fan expo and I was not a fan of Pokemon, but now all of a sudden after I bought this cool T-shirt and then I talked to these cool people and then I watched some of the games being played. Now I came home with a bunch of Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to play. Like it just it's very easy, and I think it's because you don't get judged. You're not. I've yet to go to one of these things and people be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Go away from here. They're very welcoming. Everybody wants everybody to become a fan of what they're a fan of. So you can quite easily, if you don't have a hobby, go to an entertainment expo. Go to a fan expo because you're not going to leave there without a hobby.
Oh yeah.
You're going to pick one up.
There's enough excitement there that somebody will get you into something, right? So,
Yeah.
So you're I know you're like one of those we've talked about this before in the show where you go to the bins and you search through the bins and try to find the really obscure issues and whatnot. So what's your best find you've gotten at expo?
Best find was it was a find and an experience all in one.
Really?
So Rod and I are walking around. We come across a guy that's got all these graded comics. They're all like 8.9, 9.2. And I'm going through it and I find Amazing Spider-Man issue 120 and 121 where Gwen Stacy is killed.
Yep.
And at the end of that 2-issue run, the Green Goblin is killed. So very iconic issues. I find them. I'm like, wow, graded well over 9.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
That's crazy.
Easily the biggest purchase I've ever made at that point.
Yeah.
For 2 single issues.
Yeah.
Well over $200 a piece.
Wow. That's insane.
At the time.
Yeah.
And so I buy them and the guy's like, hey, enjoy. And then I proceeded to crack into the graded comic.
No way.
I ripped into it. And the guy, Rod, who was with me at the time, he said, as enjoyable as it was to see you find these 2 issues and make that purchase and finally realize, like, hey, here's 2 iconic issues of Amazing Spider-Man that maybe I never thought I would get my hands on. He said it was even better to watch the guy's face as you cracked into these things and pulled the comic out. And it was simple as this. The guy said, what are you doing? Like, you just bought those like they're graded. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a comic collector, but I'm also a fan. I'm going to read these.
Yeah.
And the guy, Rod, was just like, the guy's jaw dropped. He just could not believe that I did that.
Yeah.
But by far, that was probably my highlight as far as finding an issue, coupled with an experience that was just over the top.
That's so funny, dude. Like, he probably had a heart attack. He's like, what are you doing? doing?
Yeah, he was beside himself.
Yeah, but I mean, like, he shouldn't have sold them. You know, like
Yeah.
if you didn't want this to happen. You know,
Well,
what would have been worse if you had like cracked open and just like ripped it in half.
well,
You
and that's
didn't
the
even
thing is
read
like
it.
you will encounter these guys at like comic as far as the comic industry, like going to the bins and searching through stuff and looking for those obscure issues or those issues that you're missing. Has gone from, I remember the first guy I bought Amazing Spider-Man stuff off of. I was going through stuff and, hey, like, this is such a fantastic collection. Like, what's going on? And he's like, well, my wife is making me get rid of them because, I'm 40 and I was, basically told, I have to grow up. And I was like, well, your pain is my gain here because
Exactly.
I'm, buying a whole bunch of your comics. But now you find a lot of those vendors are just dealers. For the most part, outside of researching the comic, getting a baseline idea how much it's worth, especially if you package up a series or a comic event, and they're just there to sell stuff.
Yeah.
Like they really have, for the most part, not all of them, but a lot of them don't have any idea what they're really selling you. They just know, World War Hulk. This was a complete series. Oh yeah, it's a great series. Like, if you ever read it, chances are they haven't. They just bought mass amounts of comics, packaged them all together, and they're just there to sell.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different experience, but I mean, it lends itself to still finding a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. 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 It's one of those things where it's like, part of the expo, you're there to, see famous people, get to know or like find out more about them. Part of the expo, you're there to be with other people that are like-minded and whatnot. And then the other part of it is like, there's some cool crap to buy. Either it's super old that you thought you'd never seen in your life, or it's like, oh man, look at this artwork this person made up. Like, it's beautiful, I want it, type of thing. So and this is part of the gig. But no, it's definitely that's pretty funny that you. The other funny part is that you did it on the floor, where it's even like dirtier. Not the physical floor, but like on the show floor, where it's dirty and busy and whatnot. Like, I can't believe you would do that. That's so fun. Was it worth it? Was it a good story? Like,
oh yeah, it was exactly what I expected. Like, I'd seen it before.
Yeah.
Like, I'd read it in either it was a compilation graphic novel or online or something. But to be holding it and go through it, it was the same thing with, I think it was Amazing Spider-Man issue 89. I want to say it was 88 and 89 or 89 and 90, where the Green Goblin figures out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Again, another iconic set of issues where then the Green Goblin reveals himself as Norman Osborn. Like, it's just at that level where you're going like, your mind is blown as a fan. Wow, I've got these issues.
yeah,
I've got these comic books. It was just I couldn't believe that I found them, got them at a reasonable price, and the guy that was actually selling them was a comic fan.
yeah,
So he knew what he was talking about. We had a great conversation, and part of that, getting a somewhat better deal was the fact that he was like, you know what, I can tell you're a fan.
yeah.
And I was kind of humming and hawing. This was actually another great experience. I was kind of humming and hawing, and I was like, I don't know. And I talked to Rod about it. I was like, yeah, it's still pretty pricey because I mean these were probably close to $500 a piece.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. So we're kind of looking at him, and this kid comes up with his dad, and he's like, oh, can I see that? And he grabs it, and he's looking at it, and then he's like, he puts it back up, and he's like talking to his dad about it, and his dad's like, well, how much is it? And he throws the price out, and he's kind of humming and hawing, and I just immediately called the guy over and said, I'll take them both.
What?
Like, right in front of this kid. I think he was like 12.
That's great. That's the most Dave thing to do.
Yeah.
It's pretty expensive, but it'll make a kid cry. Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, it was worth the extra just to make the kid, go, oh.
Thanks, old man.
Yeah, Dad, you didn't whip your wallet out quick enough.
Yeah. And did you rip it in half in front of that kid's face?
No, see, that was the thing is this guy was an actual comic book fan, so he had them bagged and boarded. but
Mm,
they were graded, but they weren't graded.
yeah, they weren't
They weren't
official.
professionally graded.
Yeah,
And I mean, I've been around comic books long enough. I mean, he let me pull them out and take a look at them. They were in great shape.
yeah. So yeah, they were definitely worth it. So yeah, yeah, expos are amazing. Highly recommend it if you are have a chance to go out. But the issue that we're gonna have going forward, especially this year, is that we're not supposed to be having expos anymore. We're not supposed to be having that big a group of people anymore. So I'm curious to
Boo.
see like where it goes, and I definitely think that Comic Con at home was a very interesting experiment that they did. Obviously, like we said earlier, that San Diego Comic Con is a whole different experience. Like it's usually the number one news place for comics and
Yeah.
comic book industry and TV shows and movies. That time of year is the number one place for it. So it's definitely a different experience than if you had like Edmonton Expo at home or Calgary Expo at home type of thing. So, but it is a really interesting experience because what they did, in case anybody doesn't know, is they basically took all of their panels, pre-recorded them, and then put them on YouTube like not periodically, but they scheduled when they were going to be live on YouTube. But yeah, it was definitely a very interesting experience. Did you get a chance to check any of them out or?
Yeah, I mean, I was curious because it was kind of like this is an interesting format to a degree because it's like San Diego Comic Con near impossible to freaking get to,
Yeah.
just to acquire tickets. So it was kind of like, oh, hey, do you know what? I get to partake. I get to be involved to some extent, even though I can't go, but nobody can go.
Yeah.
So this is great. And I honestly can't say I finished one panel
Oh, okay.
because I just found the same thing. It was the same thing with the D&D live event. Um, this event it got a little bit better with Gen Con, but because I think they're learning from each
Yeah.
other.
Hopefully.
But it was just very disjointed. It was great that you could get on and still participate, or certain things were still taking place. But when you've got somebody who is a key speaker with a horrible camera and a horrible mic, and it's cutting out, and the experience. I was pretty jazzed for the experience, and it kind of let me down.
Yeah, I don't think it was perfect, for sure. Like, I mean, obviously, you're gonna have technological glitches, and especially it's one of those situations where if it's a writer or creator who's a little bit older and doesn't even know how to use technology, it's even more
Yeah.
painful. Like, I saw a couple there where it's like, man, do you like what is happening, bro? Do you even own? Did you own a computer until this day? Type of
Yeah.
thing. Like, it's like, oh, I have to go on the interwebs. Let me go buy a computer type
Yeah.
of thing. Like, it was rough. But I think I'm a lot more positive on it than most people are because to me it felt more like what an expo should be. Well, not fully, but it was the best we're gonna get. Where like you had the panel, you had the famous like not 100% famous people, but like you had people in the industry that were able to communicate and explain their ideas and go into details about their projects and whatnot. I enjoyed that. I definitely
Yeah.
do you agree? It didn't really feel like it had its hiccups with the technology thing,
Yeah.
and you didn't have that really great fan interaction that you normally would have at an expo. One of the things I don't get is that YouTube has live streaming, and there's
Yes.
Twitch. Like, why
Yep.
didn't they live stream these things? Like,
Yeah.
because then you could have had that. Maybe not for all of them. Like, I think there were some panels that were great because they were pre-recorded and had editing and whatnot. But I feel
Yeah.
like there were some panels you could have done. You could have done live stream. You could have somebody watching the chat as you're going along and actually have people ask questions to them, because that was one of the best things about Fan Expo. Like I said, is you can actually go up to a microphone and be like, "Hey, Jewel State, what do you think about blah blah blah?" And she'd actually answer you directly. And I feel like that's something they missed out on for this one because, like I said, I don't think they
Yeah.
should have done it for every single panel, but I think for some of them they could have, and it's definitely something they
Yeah.
missed out on.
I hope going forward, like once they actually get to the point where the world gets back to semi-normal, and I hope they carry it on because I think it's just an opportunity for more fans that didn't get to go to the,
Yeah.
couldn't get to the expo for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And to be able to, like, I was recently fortunate enough to be part of a panel, or interact with a panel. 3 players from my favorite basketball team of all time, the Chicago Bulls. They had 3 people, 3 guys come on: Bill Weddington, Tony Kukoc, and Horace Grant, who are all part of one or a few of the championship years that they had there, and to interact with them, be able to ask questions, like nothing, especially as a fan. Like, I was a fan since I was in, like, elementary school.
Yeah.
And to have one of these guys answer my question, I'm 40, and I'm still going like giddy.
Yeah.
because Horace Grant answered my question.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing. That's what was the fascinating thing, being able to talk to, say, a Mark Wade, and ask him questions, is that he's answering you back.
Yeah.
Like, he's giving you the time to say, like, yeah, this is what I was thinking, and when I was writing this is what I was doing. And it was, I hope it's something that they look at and they say, okay, maybe you won't do that with the Marvel, Studios panel, which, boo, you didn't even attend,
Yeah, which we'll talk about.
You guys. But maybe with artists, writers, maybe some of the smaller TV series, like, have that interaction, because it's just going to build your brand even more.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to answer a question to some fan who's just their mind's going to be blown.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you've got a super fan on your hands because you answered a question and interacted with them. And I don't think there's any downside to this.
No. Like, I feel like the only reason they didn't is because they were nervous about the technology. Like, they were nervous because I think the way most of the panels worked is they had one person who was hosting that kind of knew what they were doing, and then they had all the, for lack of a better term, celebrities were just at home having to figure out their own situation. And I think they were just so nervous about that getting so messed up that they were just like, we're not even going to try, because they had so many panels they had to do. That's something they probably just missed. But I feel like it's something that, like I said, if you just did one, like a few panels, even just a few panels, just do them live stream, you could have the people who actually know what they're doing run those panels, and it would just be so much smoother. Because I mean, like I said, like, that's literally what Twitch is. Twitch is just somebody playing video games or doing art or something, and then talking to people while they're doing it, and just that interaction is enough to make people so happy that they give them, millions of dollars type of thing. So it's just weird that they did.
And I have to say, like, it has gotten better. Like, I have to say, D&D Live was probably one of the worst run online conventions that I've seen. But they were one of the first early in the COVID outbreak. They were scrambling to try and put something together in time for their usual time. I felt like the Comic-Con was certainly better, but I thought Gen Con, they finally started to understand, okay, we're going to have a panel of people that are going to come on, and they're going to talk about their thing, their board game or their video game or whatever it is. They're going to get on, but we're going to have one person there that is like a technical person.
Yeah.
That can make sure that the right pictures are thrown up, or that the right mics are cued, and they were starting to get it. So I mean, it can only get better from a technical aspect.
Yeah.
And I hope, like I said, I hope they keep doing it to some extent, because it's just another outreach for fans.
Oh yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like, I've definitely seen it in the past where they'll put 1 or 2 panels up on YouTube, and you can check them out. But they usually do it like a couple weeks later, and it's one of those things where it's like the fans that were there got the better experience because they could actually ask them questions. And I will admit, like, there were some, like I said, that were they were pre-recorded. I mean, all of them were pre-recorded, but you could tell they were really well edited.
Yeah.
And like, it actually made such a big difference. Like, the ones that weren't edited were just kind of a mess. You had no idea what was going on. But the ones that, they actually took the time, added some graphics, added some, splices and whatnot, were actually really well done, and a really interesting panels and whatnot. And like, they cut out all the awkward silences and all that stuff. So I really did appreciate that. And I think, for sure, I mean, even if they do go back to in-person stuff, which I'm sure they will, like by next year or the year before, at least in countries that aren't the US, that I think they still should post those panels. Because like I
Yeah.
said, like you said, like even if 500 people go and they paid tickets, there's still 1,000 people that didn't, that would find that
Yeah.
so interesting
Oh,
and would still
absolutely.
watch.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's something they should look into going forward. But yeah, another big news story that happened for Comic Con. So for the last since like 2008, I'm assuming because that's when Iron Man came out. Like
Yeah.
Hall H, and they had Comic Con was the time for all the big movie stuff, especially for Marvel. DC was always hit and miss. But yeah,
Mhm.
this year they were like, nope, we're not even going to pretend to have a panel.
Yeah.
Like the only ones that did was New Mutants, which I'll get into detail later, but like it's barely even MCU type of thing. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm actually very mixed about this because to
Mhm.
me it always felt like that always overshadowed what Comic Con really was supposed to like. Comic Con and
Yeah.
Fan Expos are supposed to be. Comic Con and Fan Expos to me were always supposed to be about the fans, about interacting with their favorite celebrities, and getting that more details about the actual books and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then it turned into just, hey, the MCU is here and gonna bulldoze over everything, and like the only thing
Mhm.
people care about is the trailers and the movie stuff. So I was a little bit okay with it. I mean, obviously, I would have
Mhm.
loved to see a Black Widow trailer. I would have loved to hear about Disney Plus,
Yeah.
but I was a little bit okay with them not being there. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point. I mean, you even see it with the smaller expos, where like comic books for the most part have always will have been brought to life by a couple things: the writers, the artists, and the fans.
Hmm.
And I think that when you bring in some of these movie stars, and whatnot, that start in these TV series or movies, it does certainly overshadow that. Because I mean, there was a time when I was going around and I would see these comic book artists or writers, like you'd be in line for way too long.
Yeah.
Now it's like no problem at all because everybody's in the other hall where all the movie stars are.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's so I agree with you on that stance. I think not having it certainly allowed other aspects or other little known entities that are out there be a little more prominent in the overall picture. I just felt their approach to your point, whether it's just a little extra footage from the Black Widow movie coming out,
Hmm.
or just even if it was just Feige in his in all his glory, just giving an update,
Yeah.
just an
Yeah.
update,
Something.
like, hey, this is what's going on in our world, and it's tough, and things are weird, and we're trying to sort it out. Like just an update. I felt that was a huge slight because as much as like I feel I'll go on a little bit of a rant here. I'm not a big fan of Kevin Feige.
Mm.
I think that every time I've heard that guy talk, he sounds like he kind of reminds me of um, like just he comes off like he is the reason you're getting to see this stuff, and you have to he has to take a little bit of a step back and realize the reason why we get to see this stuff is because there are fans.
Yeah.
There are fans that are paying, in some cases going to the movies way too much to go see a movie that has supported this industry and absolutely blown it sky high. And now it is like it's massive. Like the amount of graphic novels are now being turned into Netflix series or TV movies or movies in general is just insane because it's just all of a sudden this wealth of creativity that was made famous by the artists and the writers and the fans that enjoyed it is now being adopted into film. And not to say that all directors and actors are horrible in this instance, but he always just gave me this feeling like, hey, kiss my boots. I'm giving you what you want. It's about me, and I just dislike him for that. At the end of the day, I think Marvel could have had a panel, even a very short one, just to say, hey, this is what we've been up to, touch base with the fans. Just give a little bit of a status update on where things are at, and that would have been enough, I think,
Yeah,
to satisfy me. To satisfy me, I
yeah,
wouldn't have expected, let's reunite all the Avengers cast or anything
no,
like that. Like even if you just had a couple key people come on and say, "Hey, this is what we're working on. This is where we're at. How are you?"
yeah.
I think would have sent a much better message than going, "Yeah, we ain't coming."
Yeah, and it you could tell it did hurt Comic Con too. Like there were other things that hurt it, like the way it was formatted, and like the I'm sure just people in general weren't that interested in it. But I mean, you look at the numbers. Like I mean, this isn't the greatest statistic or whatever when it comes to like accurately portraying. But
Yeah.
apparently, like the tweets that happened in years prior were
Mm-hmm.
around like almost 2 million tweets in regards to Comic Con when it was on, and then this year's tweets about Comic Con was only 93,000. Like there was
Yeah.
definitely a giant gap between like how important Comic Con was this year, and I'm
Yeah.
sure some of that is definitely because MCU wasn't there and Marvel Studios
Mm-hmm.
wasn't there. Like that's like I said, that's usually a really big thing for San Diego Comic Con. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see, like especially if the states are still on fire next year, what they're
Yeah.
gonna do for next year. If they're gonna try to like just beg Disney to be like, please throw a trailer our way, we please, or if they're gonna try to or like I said, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe now that it'll kind of put Comic Con back where to its roots and like where it's
Yeah.
supposed to be and focus on the comics and other smaller areas too. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I remember hearing a rumor that they were contemplating holding Comic Con, so the San Diego Comic Con, like moving it,
Oh, really?
going, to other places, whether it was alternating San Diego, then somewhere else, and then back to San Diego, or if they were just going to hop around doing it everywhere. This may, coming into the next year, may be a good opportunity for them to try that. To say, hey, okay, things are not going well in the U.S. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully things have certainly turned around by then. But if it were like that, to say, okay, where is a location that is doing a better job of this, or we're not having such a struggle where they could actually maybe relocate the Comic Con there for that year, just to test the waters.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Like, what if they moved it to like Vancouver
Yeah,
or Toronto
Toronto
or something?
or
I mean, you
something.
still you
Yeah,
still have the issue of like people traveling to the expo
yeah,
would be an issue, but that'd be a lot more possible then because then you'd have people from Europe and whatnot would be able to travel through Canada, like go to Canada, not the States, right? So
yeah,
yeah, that's actually that'd be very interesting to see what happens with that.
yeah.
And yeah, like
But
we said, like we still hope Comic Con and expos exist soon. Like we really want that to come back because just the social
yeah,
interaction of having your people around you is just so good. And I'm sure they'll all the people who want to go to those things really want to go to those things because they just want to get out of the house and whatnot. But
yeah,
I do think that being forced to put stuff on YouTube and whatnot is good for the industry because I think it'll encourage them in the future to also keep doing that and like you'll eventually get this well-rounded Comic Con and expos where you'll have the stuff in person and then you'll also have the stuff digitally for people who couldn't make it. Like
yeah,
I think like I mean obviously this is just looking on the bright side because
yeah,
there's a lot of bad things that are happening, but I think this is something that'll hopefully help it out going forward.
yeah. I agree. I hope that even though it was a forced experiment, that it becomes like a
Staple.
mainstay in what they're doing
Yeah.
moving forward, even in when we get back to all willing.
Yeah.
We get back to being able to face and go see these things, that they still have that element of participation online,
Yeah.
where you can still feel involved in that event. Because I mean, it's an expensive event. It's tough to get there. I mean, there are probably people that just would probably never ever attend a Comic Con. That would just die to go to a Comic Con. And I think this is the way to reach out to those people and say, hey, as part of the fan base, you're not forgotten. We're not forgetting about you. It's not about the money. Here you go. We want to get online and
Yeah.
touch base with our fans.
Yeah. And even the smaller expos I feel like should be doing this. Like
Yeah,
I said, like I feel like it may not have the same, impact as San Diego Comic-Con, but I feel like there's some panels at the Edmonton Fan Expo or the Calgary Fan Expo could have put on YouTube and it would have still gotten, a lot of attention. And I mean, that's great marketing too, right?
Oh,
Like, I mean, you have
huge.
a person who runs across that video in September and then, the next event for next year is in October. I'm on my way. I'm getting my
Yeah.
ticket now type of thing. Like, why wouldn't
And
you?
and the great thing with whether it's YouTube or whatever format you're using to get this out there is the fact that it's there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can go to Comic Con. It lasts a week, and it's a week long experience for yourself, and then it's over. Whereas yeah, there's snippets of it online, but I mean this stuff stays online.
Yep.
So I mean, somebody 9 months later could be scrolling through and see a panel or see a fan interaction, being, hey man, that's pretty cool. I like that. And it's just, to your point, it's just endless marketing.
Yeah.
So again, I cannot see the downside of doing this outside of somebody looking at it and saying, how do we make money off that?
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
And if they stay true and they say, hey, it's obviously not going to be the big events, you're not going to have those online, but we're certainly going to have some on here, and there's going to be an ability for fans to touch base with some of these creators or some of these people involved with various fandoms. I mean that is some of the best marketing you could have. You're going to generate more fans that are already fans are going to be more loyal fans, just because they had an opportunity to participate.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you said earlier, you didn't really get through any of the panels.
No.
Did you get any like headlines or anything that you wanted to talk about?
I really didn't. I would get into most of them. I'd start to listen to it. And for myself, just because I think it was, as I've said, just a lot of technical issues. I would get annoyed and move on to the next one, or just turn it off altogether.
Okay.
A couple of the panels, I found even like some of the people that were on the panels just seemed so disinterested in being on the panel that it was just like, ugh, and let's move on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there wasn't a lot of panels that I was, I think that was the other area that I hit. There wasn't a lot of panels that I was gravitating towards, and I was going like, ooh, I got to watch that one. That's going to be awesome. It was just kind of like, bleh.
Yeah.
It was like, we have panels, but nothing really stuck out to me. Not to say that there wasn't panels that stuck out to other people and I just loved them. Just for me, I tried watching. No, I'd move on to the next one. No, that's not doing it. Oh, no, there's technical issues here. It was just overall, I had a hard time getting into it at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with most panels, even in real life, is just like some of them are so specific that if you're not in that fandom, it's like, why would I ever watch this type of thing?
Yeah.
But I did go through a couple of them. So yeah, I'll just, go through a couple of them, see what I'll let you know what I liked and what I didn't like, and then like if there's any headlines we could discuss. So one of the ones I watched was they did a New Mutants panel, which that movie I'm still holding my breath. I don't know if it's coming out. They what's funny is they actually
starting to think there isn't a movie.
Yeah, no,
There's
it doesn't
just
exist. It's all been a
clips.
prank this whole time. So it was actually really interesting, like to hear the people who made this movie talk about it, because you could tell. They actually had a pretty good humor about it, because the first thing they showed when the panel started was a trailer where it would show the original dates of when it was supposed to come out, and then they would cross it out with an X and then like put the new date, and like they were making jokes about it, and then they actually put a bunch of like comments from YouTube videos and tweets going like, hey, is this movie real, and like all this stuff. Like they actually had a pretty good humor about it. So the panel it was like the director had the whole cast, and then the host, and then for a while there, it actually had the artist of the Demon Bear series, Sienkiewicz. I don't know how to pronounce that. So like, it actually was a really interesting panel for me as a person who's really curious about this movie, because it actually gave you a lot of details about like, what were the inspirations, how did you, deal with certain characters and whatnot. And like like I said, they even had the artist. You find out they actually had the original artist on set to give advice and to give like, hey, when me and Claremont were making this is the direction we were going with these characters. And it was actually interesting to find that out, because then it makes you even more excited for the movie, to go like, oh man, they had the original guys, or at least one of the original guys helping them with this movie. That's really cool. And like I said, they actually had like, you know, some fun with it and whatnot.
Yeah, I did think that was one of the few that I got through probably most of, and I agree with you. I think the structure was good, the humor was good, it was informative. It was just, unfortunately, like, yeah, I'll go see the movie. I'm just not super hyped about it.
Yeah.
Especially with all the delays and
It doesn't
everything
help,
else
yeah.
that's been coming out. But that was a great example of one that was put together well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, you could tell some of the actors were very half checked out, because it's one of those things. They filmed this movie because it was supposed to come out originally in 2018, which means they would have filmed it 2016, 2017. So it's been 3 to 4 years since they worked on this movie. So you get like Charlie Heaton, the guy who's playing Cannonball, I think that's his name. You could tell he was just like, why am I here?
Yeah.
Like, but then you had like Maisie Williams, who was having a good time with it. Like, you could tell she was like, oh man, like, I haven't seen.
By the time this movie is released, people will be like, well, who's in it? And they'll say, well, Maisie Williams. Who's that? You know, Game of Thrones? What?
Yeah, what's that?
Because it's just been that long.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
The other guy from Stranger Things, Stranger what?
Yeah. So apparently, I don't know if they didn't officially discuss this on the panel, but I heard of it like in an interview later. Apparently, they legally have to play it in theaters, because that was the contract when the movies switched from Fox to Disney, and that was one of the reasons the delay is happening, is they legally have to play it in theaters. So they announced during the panel that it's supposed to be coming out end of August, but what they said was select theaters. So what people are assuming is going to happen is they're going to put it in, like, you know, they'll send it to Canada, they'll send it to a couple European countries that are doing better. It'll just bomb super hard in theaters for the first week, and then they'll just put it to Disney Plus right after. Because it's like, we did your legal obligation, just put it on Disney Plus and get it over with, you know, type of thing. But it does sound really good. Like the way they were describing it, and like the people who played the characters sounded like hey, we had a great time with it. So I'm very curious to see. It just kind of sucks to think that, like, if this movie's great, there's a good chance that it's just gonna die, because they're gonna want to reuse all these characters for the MCU eventually.
Yeah.
So that's one of those, like, you know, like I said, it was a great panel. So if you have time to go check it out, go check it out. But it's kind of a bittersweet type of thing. So we'll see. The other panel I watched was called Marvel 616. So I didn't know what this was before I watched it. So apparently what's happening is Marvel is putting out a bunch of documentaries on the comic book industry on Disney Plus. And it's basically like an anthology where they would bring in a director and they would go like, hey, what are you interested in? And some of them like were like, I've never read a comic book in my life. Teach me about comic books. And they did an entire documentary on that. And then other directors were like, I've actually written comics. I've actually, I grew up reading them. I'm going to find random artists and writers and ask them the most obscure questions of all time. And that's what they, like, they didn't show these documentaries because they haven't come out yet, but they would show clips. And a lot of them sounded really interesting. So this one got me very, very excited for it. And like I said, it was something I had no idea was even coming out. But because they did this panel, I'm now really hyped to go see that on Disney Plus and whatnot. So that'll be another interesting one. I like, even if you don't see the panel, I recommend paying attention to Disney Plus and checking out that doc. I think the documentary series is called Marvel 616. So it'll be very interesting. That was another one I watched. Another panel I watched was Marvel, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, Next Big Thing. So this is basically like them talking to the artists and writers of the big events coming out in the Marvel comics. So they talked to Al Ewing and your favorite person ever, Dan Slott. Or no, Dan Slott, sorry. Dan Slott, the guy who wrote Spider-Man for you. They talked to them about Empire. And then they talked to a couple of the writers from Ten of Swords for X-Men. So Empire, it was very interesting to hear them talk about it, like what they were trying to do with it and like what they're doing. So like getting their thought process. What I liked about this panel in general, before I get into specifics, is the way they edited it. I thought was very good, because what they did is they only had 2 people per section. So like what I said with New Mutants and what I said with 616 is they had a bunch of people talking and they would
Yeah.
take turns, which was good, but it was still one of those things where it's like you couldn't get too much into detail. You couldn't focus on one person at a time because you had to like get to the next person and not waste time. Whereas these ones, they had two people per topic so that they could go into depth. They could give you more thorough explanation and whatnot. So I thought that was actually a way smarter idea to do a panel as
Yeah.
opposed to like the next one I watched was the DC one and they had like 20 people on at the same time and it was just chaos. It was
Oh
like,
yeah.
what is happening? I don't know who's talking. I don't know what they're talking about. Everybody's just awkward and like talking over each other. It was awful. So like the Marvel Next Big Thing one was actually really interesting because like I said, they focused it down and were like, hey, this is what we're talking about. Let's get into detail. So Empire sounds really cool. I mean, I haven't read any of them yet. I don't know if you have.
No, I've certainly waiting with anticipation for the subscription services to kick back in so that they start delivering stuff. But I had read some of the issues that were kind of leading up to it, and yeah, very interested to see where they go with it and what they do with it.
Yeah, it's I've heard some other I've heard people talk about it who've actually read the first couple issues because I think only like up to issue 3 have been released now, and it sounds like what's happening, and this will be a whole another podcast about summer events and whatnot. We'll definitely have to, or like overarching events we'll have to get into. But it sounds like what this one is focusing on is this spread issues, like the or what is it called, tie-in issues where
Yes.
it's like, it was Spider-Man but Empire Spider-Man and like Thunderbolts but Empire Thunderbolts. Apparently those issues are going to be way more in-depth in stuff, whereas the main issues of Empire are going to be more general and like the war in general type of thing. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
see how that works and if it's worth it, because I think those are the type of summer events I don't usually enjoy, where the main comic is the less important one. Like, that always seemed weird to me that they would do that, but the way they described it sounded very interesting. So Empire sounds interesting. The next one they talked about was Ten of Swords, which is the giant X-Men event coming out soon.
Yeah.
Apparently it's not coming until like September, October type of thing. So they didn't really talk about the concept. What they talked more about is how they came up with the concept and how they're going forward with it. I didn't realize it sounds more like the X-Men series are just completely separate from Marvel, even in the comic books.
Yeah.
Like the way they're saying is basically like they have like you have all the Marvel people and like you have the Spider-Man people over here, you have the Thor people over here, but they still work with each other. But what it sounds like what's happening is that the entire X-Men writers and artists are on their own little island and do their own thing, and they do everything like by committee.
Yeah.
It's like they basically took what they're doing on Krakoa in the book, where they have like that secret council, and they're doing the exact same thing in real life with the writers, where they're like, hey, let's get in a room together and like plan our entire thing, and like we'll write it not by committee, but like we'll discuss it by committee, and we're gonna do X-Men their own thing, and then we'll just tie into Marvel when we need to, but X-Men are mainly gonna be their own thing. So I actually thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like even just reading the various X-Men series leading up to this, but just the series in general, there's very little mention or crossover of the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
Like it's been a long time since they've just delved in and focused on X-Men mutants, without doing Avengers versus X-Men, or
Yeah.
they did they did just recently cross over Fantastic Four and X-Men, but I mean there was a reason for that to happen, in the sense of the Franklin Richards is technically a mutant.
Yeah.
Right, so there was that dynamic which kind of made sense for them to explore it. But I'm very interested to see where this this X-Men series, the X-Men series in general, and the universe regarding the X-Men, where this is going. Because I find that and the writer's name is escaping me, for the main series, Hickman.
Hickman, yeah.
I find him he slow plays everything,
Yeah.
and it's not just okay, you get 6 issues into anything and all of a sudden it's just that resolved that stuff. He goes for the long game, and I know at least with the Avengers, when he did that one, it paid off.
Yeah.
I thought it did at least. So I'm very interested to see where this one's going. But it doesn't surprise me, but it surprises me that you would say that that that's exactly what they do is they've just kind of closed off.
Yeah.
They're having their little secret council meetings to discuss the series.
Yeah. And like the other thing that they're doing is they're not doing what Empire, like I said, was doing, where they had the main issues and then they had the like tag-in issues. That's what I thought
Yeah,
they were going to do, where they're going to have like a main storyline called Ten of Swords, and then they'd have like Ten of Swords Marauders and Ten of Swords, New X-Men or something like that. But what they're actually doing is just like you have to get each, so it's going to rotate between the sub series. So like Ten of Swords #1 is actually like X-Men #20, and
yeah,
then Ten of Swords #2 is actually New Mutants #13, and like Ten of Swords ten of 3 is like Marauders #40 or something like that. Like
yeah.
that's how they're doing it, which is on one hand I think is really interesting because it makes it seem more like an event where like every single book is affected. On the
Yeah.
other hand, this is going to be a pain in the ass to try to read because it's basically going to force you to buy every single series. Like if you liked Marauders but hated X Force or Excalibur, you're gonna have to read it if you want to know what's happening in Ten of Swords. So I think it's a interesting take. I think we'll see what happens basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean they've done this before with whether it was Mutant Messiah, with the X-Men titles, where it was all the X-Men titles, whatever the next issue was part 2 in the series, part 3 in the series, and I have to say I enjoy that a lot more for myself, just because it's most of those titles I collect anyway, so obviously it's easy to keep up with it. So I'm kind of glad that you said that that's kind of the direction they're going in, because I feel like the other ones where they've gone like, oh, here's the event, and then here's all these millions of side comics that have somewhat to do with what's going on there, maybe a little bit of a connection, and if you feel free to collect them all, and it's just a ton. And I think the only one that they nailed on a regular basis using that format was the most recent Secret Wars. I very much enjoyed the main title comic was great, and then a lot of the offshoots I very much enjoyed.
Okay.
But I can't say that about a lot of the bigger Marvel events that they've done, like War of the Realms. War of the Realms, the main series itself, I enjoyed. There were the odd offshoot comics that were okay, but for the most part, they were forgettable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like I've definitely read some where it was like, oh, why? Like the only reason it's tie-in is because it just happened. They mentioned it once for like half a second.
Yeah.
Like I remember back when I was reading Ghost Rider very regularly, they had World War Hulk Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
And it was like Ghost Rider actually almost beat the Hulk, but then stopped because reasons. But then they never talked about it in the main book ever. That Hulk almost lost, because that was just a side issue that didn't matter, type of thing. And it was just like, but that was so cool, but it doesn't matter. Why am I reading this? Type of thing. I think that definitely speaks to, like, it did make me realize when you said that, is like, this is definitely what older events used to do. They used to do, like you said, like they wouldn't have one main line of comics. It would be like it spread throughout the sub series and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, as a graphic novel reader, this seems like a pain in the ass. Whereas as an individual issue reader, it's probably like, oh, this is what I do normally, so why does it bother me, type of thing. So,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So yeah, and then that was the main points from Marvel Next Big Thing. And then I did watch a couple other panels, but they're pretty specific. Like I said, like I watched the Avatar: Last Airbender panel, which was really interesting. So if you're a big fan of that, I encourage you. And then like I said, I tried to watch DC, but it was just a mess. I got like 5 minutes in there, and I'm like, what is happening? Like there was just no structure. They had way too many people on, and it was just a waste of time, type of thing. So I definitely think like, go ahead.
I did find the same thing with regards to the his Dark Materials group that they had. It seemed to be like, it was like, here's all the people, chaos ensues. Some people seem disinterested, So at the end, you end up really just talking to two or three people pretty much the entire thing, because the other ones were just either not involved, or the lady that was running the interviews and stuff just didn't think to ask them enough questions, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it was just, it was one of those ones that I watched again a good chunk of it because I very much enjoyed the series. My wife is a big fan, but I was just like, ugh, this is so painful.
Yeah. Like it wasn't great. And yeah, like we were saying earlier, all these panels are on YouTube. So I highly encourage any listeners, like if you have something specific you're hoping they made a panel of, go check it out. And like I said, the ones that I mentioned that were good, I highly recommend checking out if you're a fan, because they're really well done. The ones that are bad are really bad, so watch out for that. But yeah, I think Comic-Con at home was a very interesting experience. I think it'll definitely shape what is to come, but I do hope one day that we can all go back to in person and that type of stuff. So I don't know, any final thoughts for you, Dave, on this subject?
No, again, I think as they continue to progress going forward, like anything, they're going to get better at the formats, especially if prolonged. It's a forced thing, where these like you've got New York Comic Con usually comes up fallish, I believe.
Yeah.
You're going to see possibly that one, I guess, maybe go with the same format, but they'll continue to get better as they move forward. I just hope that as they move forward and hopefully soon as we return to normal, that they continue, because I do think there was some value. Certainly, my take on it, is not the best. It may have been just my mood that weekend trying to get into it. But I can just see, just from the various conventions from different genres of geekdom, I see them getting better, and they're getting better at it and better at it, where it becomes a lot more tolerable and well put together, and they're starting to realize certain things or certain aspects of how to better interact with the fan base, or how to better get the points of the panel across without over talking each other. It's going to get better. I just hope they keep it up, because I do think there's some value in them continuing the format regardless of whether they get back to normal or not.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Make sure to follow us on whatever platform you found us on. And yeah, make sure to mention in the comments what you thought about Comic-Con at home or expos in general. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye for now.